G'day, KFC SuperCoaches. BBL SuperCoach is back for BBL 11. We could not be more excited. It's our official launch day today, but you might have noticed opened a couple of weeks ago. Certainly plenty of diehards have already been signing up at supercoach.com.au. And the best thing about this summer is we've assembled our best team ever of KFC SuperCoach experts, including two faces that I'm sure will be pretty well known to all the cricket fans out there that are tuning in today in one of the best batsmen in BBL history in Cal Ferguson, and also Mr. Cricket himself, Mike Hussey, and a top 20 finisher in KFC SuperCoach as well. So that's his big claim to fame. Great to have those two boys and the Phantom joining me today, and we'll be here for the next 30 to 45 minutes or so. We can take your questions, and we're going to chat a bit of cricket and a bit of KFC SuperCoach as well. But Huss, thanks for jumping on and joining us, and great to have you as part of our team for KFC SuperCoach this summer as well. I know the banter between yourself and Warnie and Cal and Ish has already kicked off.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Good to see you. Good to see Ferg and the Phantom. Can't see the Phantom, but good to say good day to the Phantom.
They won't lose me.
On board. Looking forward to it. I am a keen SuperCoach player, I must admit. We've got a good league in the AFL one with a few of the past cricketers and current cricketers, and it's pretty hotly contested, I've got to say. So still getting my head around this BBL SuperCoach a little bit, I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Yeah, that wasn't specific. Nathan points out a good point. I was just thinking that before we came on air, that we're going to look Sydney Thunder biased here, because we've got Mike Hussey, who won a BBL with the Sydney Thunder back in BBL 05, and Cal Ferguson, who, how long have you been captain, Cal? Last, 3-4 years up there?
Last couple of years. Took over from the enormous boots to fill of Shane Watson. But the last couple of years I was captain, and this is my first year away from the Thunder. So it's it's a strange feeling not playing the Big Bash this year, but certainly a bit of a change of pace lifestyle-wise, and it's given me an opportunity to jump headfirst into the BBL SuperCoach after being in the AFL one with Huss for the last 3 or 4 years. So really excited, and unlike Huss, I'm ready to go. I've got my head around all of the rules and everything, and I've got my first team line up for round one. So I'm ready to go. I'm not sure what Huss has been doing. He's been just twiddling his thumbs there, thinking it's just gonna happen for him like he thought it did in the AFL. It's not going to be the case this year, is it, Tim?
Yeah, so no, I love a bit of banter. That's already, and I know Warnie's talking himself up as a possible winner already this year. I think he got up to top 50 or top 100 at one stage last year, and then finished about 500th overall or something. So he fancies himself this season as well, and I think Isha's going to be over here too for the Ashes, and we're looking forward to having her as part of the team. But Huss, tell us about this Cricketers League, because Trent Copeland, we know, is a KFC SuperCoach Nuffy as well. Damien Fleming loves it, and yourself and Ferg pretty competitive as well. Yeah, tell us about your history in SuperCoach, mate, and in this famous Cricketers League as well.
Well, I wouldn't say Ferg's pretty competitive with it. I think, he's generally in the bottom half of the table. So, I think he needs to pick up his deck. But, some of the usual suspects, I think Copes is generally there or thereabouts. I think he won it this year for us, only by a few points. But, and Damien Fleming's actually a very good player. So you can sort of see that everyone at the top end of the table has sort of similar sort of tactics and the way they sort of go about it. And so, finding that little niche player at the back end of the season is often, the difference between winning and losing. But it's actually a pretty good league, I must admit. And I must confess, I do listen to a few of the podcasts, the Phantom included, and get plenty of tips along the way. So, it's pretty handy to have that advice.
Jeez, how do you feel about that, Phantom? You'd be loving sitting back, patting yourself on the back there.
I'm flattered, making me smile. You can't see that, but we must have some big names on, Tim. You've taken 4 minutes 25 to actually mention me and let me speak on the SuperCoach BBL podcast. So it's a pleasure to be in such great company. Looking forward to another big year. But Tim, I think we need to mention Huss's performances in the AFL world too. Not just a keen SuperCoacher with the competitive league, actually almost in the prize money and in the KFC gear as well, given his finish.
Yeah, so what was it, 2018, Huss? You finished with about 12th or 13th overall in the end?
13th I finished. I was a bit dirty. It was all a bit lucky. I must admit, I dodged a lot of the injuries that year and just managed to, just jag it. I was actually a bit dirty in the last round because I didn't know whether to take Max Gorn's vice captaincy score. He scored, I think he got 112. And I thought, no, I've got to risk it to try and win my league. So I took Jack McRae, and he scored only 80 on the next day. And then Max Gawn was actually scaled back up, and he got over 120. So I would have actually finished sixth if I had have taken Max Gawn's score. So I was pretty dirty by the end of it.
So what we're hearing here, Huss, is that you gassed it, really. There was a big decision to be made in the last round, and you just fell on your own sword.
Yeah, pretty much right.
Oh, I would have sleepless nights about that still, Huss, but I'm glad you've sort of moved on better than I probably would have anyway. So, Phantom, how are you feeling as well? So we got Cal on board, we got Bryce Michell, our stats man, as well over in South Australia, like your good self. I feel like you've been on your own there in SA for a while, but you've assembled this nice little Crow Eater army over there to take on the rest of us this summer.
Finally, we've been unrepresented in all forms of KFC SuperCoach for a while. We've got some great players over here, some great sports people in both the sports we play SuperCoach on. So it's nice to hopefully get a few back on the Eastern Seaboard this summer. Cal and I will be teaming up. Bryce also reached out to us and looking forward to teeing up with him down at Adelaide Oval this summer ahead of a few Strikers games. So the state of our Origin rivalry, we had it in AFL SuperCoach the previous couple of years, definitely on in BBL this summer.
So massive summer of cricket ahead. We know that. T20 World Cup's already well and truly underway. The Aussies had a good win again this morning. David Warner and Aaron Finch, who looks like he's going to be one of the most popular KFC SuperCoach picks this season, both in some nice touch with the bat after Adam Zampa bowled really well against Sri Lanka. We got the Ashes, which I'm sure Hussey will be pretty heavily involved on the Fox cricket side of things, and obviously the BBL, which is taking real focus as well. I can't remember a summer of cricket this big in Australia for a while, which is going to be awesome. The fact that a lot of us can get out and see games live as well. Huss, just on the Ashes, like we know that the English squad's been announced as well. The English Lions tour squad also announced too, with some BBL players like Tom Abel in that as well. But I think for KFC SuperCoaches, the biggest talking points are going to be the Aussie side, and keen to get your thoughts on what the makeup might be there, because Travis Head, like we talk about South Australians, he's in just about as good a form as anyone in the country at the moment. And then we've got James Pattinson retiring from Test cricket in the last couple of weeks, which probably brings Michael Nisa, who's gone back up to the Brisbane Heat, into the frame, at least for a squad place there, you'd think, for the Ashes too. So how do you think that Ashes squad might be taking shape for the Aussies?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all pans out, and it's big implications for KFC SuperCoach, really, because you mentioned the likes of Nisa, Travis Head. I'm sure they're going to be involved in the either in the Ashes squad, or they're going to be involved in that Australia A or that Lions game. So they might miss the first couple of games. Throw in Sean Abbott. I'm sure he's going to be there as well, which I'm sure he'd be a popular pick leading in that first game, particularly with the Sixers having a double round week, and maybe Usman Khawaja as well. He's been in great form for Queensland, so I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of is out for the first couple of games for the Thunder as well. So, yeah, it's going to be really tricky, and this is what I'm trying to get my head around is which players are going to be available, which overseas players are going to be available, and so we're going to have our finger right on the pulse, just before that first round starts.
And of course, would just be our luck, Cal, that the Sixers and the Heat play twice in the first game week of KFC SuperCoach. So, yeah, it looks like we might be without some of the big names there, like Abel and Abbott and these guys that would probably normally be walk-up starts. But what do you think? Like, you've seen Usman Khawaja up close the last couple of years, Cal, playing with him up at the Thunder as well. And like we mentioned, the form that Travis Head's in there in the Shield, but Usman Khawaja's now got back-to-back hundreds and really pressing his case to, potentially partner David Warner or even slot in at number 5. We know he's a pretty versatile batsman. How do you think the Aussie side's taking shape?
Yeah, look, I think we've seen some guys that are vying for positions in reasonable touch at the moment. So that's a really positive thing coming into the Ashes. The depth players that have been in and around the mark over the last couple of years are certainly standing up. Sean Abbott, as you mentioned before, is red hot at the moment. Travis Head as well. So really good signs for the Aussies coming into the Ashes. Usman Khawaja, look, he just oozes class, and Huss has seen it up close through a lot of Usman's career. I've seen it up close and personal the last few years. He's still batting beautifully. In the red ball format, I watched him make 100 against us in the Shield last year and just was timing the ball beautifully. And it looks like he's moving nicely again this year. I commentated half of his 100 in Adelaide for the Cricket Network, and he just looked in fantastic nick. He was moving nicely at the crease, forward and back, timing the ball beautifully, front and back foot. Just looked in great touch, and for a guy that's, I think, opened the batting in Test cricket 7 times, I think he averages around 90. He could bat anywhere in that lineup for the Australian team, and if I was selecting the side, I wouldn't be shy about having a conversation around him opening the batting in the Test series. Obviously, with Will Pucovski suffering another concussion recently, which was horrible news. It wouldn't just be someone like Marcus Harris or Joe Burns in the conversation. You'd have to look at Usman with the record he's got opening the batting in Test cricket. I'd be erring that way, actually, if it was me selecting. So, look, he's in great touch. If he doesn't play for in the Test series, then he'd be someone I'd be really looking to get into your KFC Big Bash League team SuperCoach this year, just on the back of the fact that he probably hasn't piled them on in the last couple of years like we'd expect with regards to, say, seeing the 50s column racking up. I think he's in for a big one this year if he plays the SuperCoach for us in the BBL. I think I'd be expecting sort of 4 or 5 50s from him opening the batting this year, taking the captaincy on, that added responsibility. If he looks like he's going to start round 1, I'm looking at putting him in there from ball 1 and expecting a big season from him.
Yeah, so Alex Hales was the one, wasn't he, Cal, last year that really, put you guys on his back a bit with some of his performances, especially when he hit a purple patch. I think it was in the second half of the season, or the sort of after the first third of the season anyway. But what do you think, like, I don't know what sort of insights you still have into the Thunder, but without you there in the top order, like you've batted at number 3 or number 4 for the past few seasons as well. We talk about Usman Khawaja potentially not there at the start of the season as well. Alex Hales obviously has one of those spots, but is an Ollie Davies, is a Matthew Dilks going to step up? Is another youngster like Baxter Holt sort of potentially going to put their name up as a potential KFC SuperCoach cheapie this summer, do you think?
Yeah, look, I think with the list changes that they've made, they're putting their faith in Ollie Davies, who did show us a fair bit last year, showed some real power hitting ability, and I think they'll look to bat him at 3. They won't be shy to give Matt Gilks an opportunity. Perhaps if it was, say, in the power play, early in the power play, they might throw Gilksy in there, who's proven that he can bat up the top against the new ball in power plays successfully, and maybe hold Ollie off until the end of the power play where the spin comes into it, where we know Ollie, that's his real strength, being able to put spinners to the sword. So that's how I see it panning out. It'll probably be Ollie and Gilksy sort of perhaps rotating at 3 and 4. But obviously with Billings coming in, he'll bat in the middle order somewhere, I think. And perhaps it'll be between maybe a Jill.
Is that Cow?
Yeah, I think we potentially just lost Cal there, which is okay. We'll get him back. But Huss, Phantom, you might want to jump in there.
That's some good insight there to the Thunder's lineup. You mentioned Gilks and Davies, their spots in the batting order, and could become very important for KFC SuperCoaches. Davies at 74K, a cheapy option that we hope to get opportunity, and Gilks too at 62K, so even cheaper. And as we know, in all forms of KFC SuperCoach, the cheapies are key to your starting lineup. So some good insight there from Cal Ferguson. Fingers crossed it does pan out like that.
So there's no better cheapie this year, if we're talking cheapies, than Aaron Finch. He's 62K, which is just ridiculous. I paid 185K for him last year, so about 120K less than I paid when he had his worst run ever in the BBL, unfortunately. But Huss, do we expect, he's the Aussie captain. He looks in pretty reasonable touch over at the T20 World Cup. Do we expect him to bounce back in a big way for the Renegades?
Oh, I think so. I think it's an absolute no-brainer to get him in there. You know he's not going to be in the Test team or the even the Australia A team. So you know he's going to be available the whole time. You know he's going to bat at the top of the order, and he's just so cheap. He's rookie price, so it's just an absolute no-brainer. He'll definitely be in my team to start, and I'm sure he'll be in a lot of other teams around the country as well.
Just to be fair, though, Tim, on last year's form, he's not making West Torrens' D-grade T20 team, though, Aaron Finch. Such a disappointing campaign. You went through it. I sat there with you last year and went through the torment that Aaron Finch put you through. But I think I agree with Huss. It's so cheap that, even if he does fail or doesn't go back to the level we know he can get at the price and on the bench, it's sort of you can't really lose.
It's a free hit, like, for using a bit of BBL terminology, isn't it? Like, and there's not, if you scour through the playlist at the moment that's up, there's not all that many cheapies available. Like, most guys have at least had some sort of exposure to the BBL, which means that based on their averages from the past couple of years, they're 70, 80Ks. You've got to pay that little bit more for, I don't know, like an Ollie Davies type that you mentioned that's about 75K. So pretty rare that you can get the Australian captain for a rookie price. And that would not happen in AFL SuperCoach. You wouldn't be able to get a Max Gawn type for 117K, whatever it might be at the start of the season. So, yeah, seems like a no-brainer. I agree with Huss. Cal, is he among the side that you've put together?
Yeah, absolutely. He's locked in. He's just such a class player. We do know that the old Etihad and Docklands Stadium, Marvel, can be a little bit tricky to bat on at times, depending on the weather and how much they can open the roof, and if they shut it, it becomes a bit of a greenhouse in there, and the wicket can just get a little bit sticky, and it can certainly be quite a heavy atmosphere, so the ball does swing. So, opening the batting, it can be a tricky task there, and obviously he didn't have the best tournament that we've ever seen, but I'm expecting him to bounce back and be at his best this year. He's just such an important player for the Renegades, and he'll get the chance to bat at the top where it's the best conditions in most circumstances for the Renegades every time they take the field. So I'm expecting him to have a big tournament.
Yeah, I just can't see him and Sean Marsh having two bad summers in a row. And Sean Marsh has been making hundreds for fun over in WA grade cricket over your way at the moment, Huss, too, and looks in pretty ominous form going into another BBL campaign for the Renegades. But, Cal, I think your team's going to be up on our website in the next couple of days, the first team release that we're putting out there, so no pressure. But how's it coming together, and without giving away too much to Huss, because I'm sure you don't want to give him any...
We're giving Huss absolutely zero wherever possible. However... it is coming together quite nicely. There's one tricky fixture that I was looking at with the Heat having the double game in the first round, but then having the bye the next round. So that's a tricky one. It'll be interesting to see how Mike Hussey handles that one and whether he does throw any Heat players in the first round and leave himself wide open in the second round. But that was something that I did notice and I've taken into consideration. A player I will throw out there who I think is in for a big tournament and who has really impressed me. I played with him at the Lahore Calanders not more than about 4 months ago, and he's been smashing them around the world since, is Tim David from the Hurricanes. He's really impressed me with his power hitting, and I feel like with a big BBL under his belt last year and then some overseas experience, he's in for a big one this year. So there's one for everyone. That's a free one. Tim David in for a big year. He's at 113K at the moment, and I think that's going to be well worth it.
Yeah, and he had, especially early on last year, I think a few people saw his name on the team sheet early for Hobart, thought, who's this guy? I know he'd played a couple of games for the Scorchers before that without really putting his name up in lights, but he was one of those guys that really benefited from the change to the strike rate bonus in SuperCoach last year as well. If you got to 20 at a fast rate, like he so often did, batting at sort of number 5 or number 6 for the Hurricanes, you picked up pretty big points. So don't mind that, Carl. And he can actually bowl a bit as well, although they did use him sparingly last year with the ball.
Yeah, and he's been putting a lot of work into his bowling as well. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't get an over or two, or they look to use him in a power play at some stage. He's tall, and he's got, which does give him a bit of an advantage with bounce, which we do see guys get caught out with, trying to hit big down the ground early against spin. He does hit the spice of your bat quite well. Someone else who I feel like, and he does cost you a bit, and his body has been a bit susceptible in the last few years, but Nathan Coulter-Nile, he's a guy who has shown some really good form in the IPL recently. I think he's looking in good nick. Ran into him in Adelaide last year when he was just getting himself prepared to come over to head over to the IPL, the second half of the summer in Australia. And he looked in really good physical condition. So I'm hopeful he's in for a big season because I'm going to throw him in round one.
Yeah, I like that. So, Huss, what about you? How's the team looking? You got any names that you've locked in or just any penciled in at this stage?
Yeah, I've had a bit of a crack. First sort of go at it, but still a work in progress. But I'm sort of still a bit like Fergie, just trying to get my head around how many Sixers and Heat players I'm going to try and get into my team to start with. And then trying to get that balance right. Yeah, Heat and Sixers, then the strikers have got the double in round 2, and then the stars in round 3. So I want to try and set myself up over the first 3 rounds. And so trying to get that balance right with that. I'm also taking in a bit of a strategy. I got frustrated last year with going for players that could just bat or just bowl. So I'm actually going to go down more the all-rounder path. It's a bit of a gamble perhaps, but I'm going to go either top order batting, all-rounders, and then probably the real gun bowlers if I can. So I'm sort of, throwing around a few names, but I'm keen on the all-round types, the likes like Dan Christian, Glenn Maxwell, Marcus Stoinis, Tom Curran, in the first round for the Sixers. But I'm just trying to get the right number of double round players in that first round. So at the moment, I've got 1, 2, 3 Sixers, and I've only got 1 Heat player at the moment. So I don't know if that's enough. So I still might need to play around with it, but I want to try and get a couple of strikers in there, and I want to get a couple of stars players in there as well. So I'm well set up. Try and keep a good core of my team, and then try and just mix and match as the double rounds go along.
Hey, Tim, some interesting thoughts there from Huss and Ferg. How are you going to play that double game week with, obviously, the Heat buyers, the 2 other guys mentioned here? Interesting. It's going to be some different tactics, I think. How's your side shaping up with Heat representatives?
Yeah, I've got to stop sharing emails with Huss because his team sounds a lot like mine at the moment. I think I'm pretty similar, but it's really tricky with the Heat because we don't know how many of their guys are how many of their best 11 are actually going to be available. Like I would expect that Michael Neser, he's been on the fringes of the Australian squad for the last couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised if he was 12th or 13th man for the first test of the Ashes. So does he get released? We know it's getting a bit easier to travel around the country at the moment, apart from Huss's neck of the woods. But would he get released to play BBL, or would he be required to hang around and carry the drinks and stay with the squad? I don't know. I'd love to pick him because he's only sort of mid-120s. The Heat haven't even signed Jack Wildermuth yet, which is a bit of a maybe they have, but they haven't announced it just yet. So he's one that I've been waiting to see added to the game because he made a really fast start to last year. And I'm sort of thinking if he's available, pending Australia age, he's a guy that I'd like to have there that can bat and bowl as well. But then as Chris points out, and I don't know if that's the Chris Baker that won last year, I don't know why he's asking me for advice, but I would expect, as Chris says, that Mark Steckety and Mitch Swepson are probably both going to be playing for Australia A in the English Lions game as well, so you can cross a line through them. So apart from, I don't know, like Mujeeb Rahman, if you're willing to pay top price, there's not too many Heat guys that jump off the page. It's pretty risky going into a double game week without Chris Lynn. He was one of the first guys I picked, but aside from that, I don't think I have any other Heat players yet. And I wanted to pick Neser, I wanted to pick Abbott, but I just assuming that they're not going to be there in round 1. So like Huss, I've got Tom Curran because he just a couple of seasons ago when he was out here, he scored well regardless of whether he had a double game week or not. And I think he'll probably be my captain in round 1. I'm sure you guys noted this. It might have been something he'd talk about in the tactics a bit, Ferg, with BBL games, but so many wickets fall in the 19th and 20th overs of games, and Tom Curran bowls the 20th more often than not for the Sixers, and that's where a lot of his SuperCoach comes from. So he's a guy that I'm really...
The vultures come in for the tail, don't they, sometimes? The vultures come in from a long way up and just start swooping on a few cheap ones at the back end. But it's a really good point about the Heat. I wouldn't even be surprised if Mark Steckety was in the mix for the Australia A stuff as well. His form in the Shield at Adelaide Oval was as good as anything I've seen in a couple of years. He was a standout bowler in that game by the length of Brabham Strait. So that Heat side could be seriously demoralised by selection at the top level, but also at the A level. So that makes including any, and I'll let everyone in on that. I've actually not got a Heat player in there at the moment. Chris Lynn's the only one that I'm considering at the moment. It's a side that could be really depleted.
Yeah. So the other round one talking point, Phantom, is how many strikers you start with. And Rashid Khan is top dollar, but I think the thing that makes him an attractive buy, even though he only plays once in round one, is that he's got the Renegades first up, and the Renegades collapsed several times last season. Obviously, hopefully they've been doing a bit of work on their batting based on what they just up in BBL 10. But how many strikers have you got in your lineup at the moment? And another one that stands out for me is a Matt Renshaw type, who I think just got 100 in the last couple of days in the Shield as well. He's only 67K, I think. So, like Aaron Finch, you can stash him on your bench and then potentially bring him on for round two.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I guess also where he fits in that lineup as well is the place is the thing to watch. I guess over here as we build up to the first game. Rashid Khan, you mentioned he's pretty much should be the first picked even in a non-double game week. But I like the other boys a bit, just piecing it together, picking the big guns at the moment, and then plenty still water to go on the bridge, over the next month with all the international selection and the players that will be there and won't be there. You talked about Alex Carey, you talked about Travis Head as well in potential there unavailability for that first game. So still plenty to play out over here. Rashid Khan, the only striker I've locked in for now. But yeah, I do like Renshaw given his price. There's some interesting guys at the strikers. John Wells bats so well in that middle order, but in case of SuperCoach BBL, we don't like picking middle order batsmen that don't bowl. Even though when he does get his chance, he does perform well. But there might be 2 or 3 games when Carey and Head are in the top order and they get off to a flyer and Well doesn't really get a go or comes in late. So a few interesting selections in that middle order, but all depend, I think, on what happens with Carey and Head early on.
So, Huss, we talked a bit about the cheapies. So I want to get your thoughts on some of the absolute big guns, because coaches will be wanting to get as many of your Glenn Maxwell, Rashid Khan, we mentioned, types, and Daniel Sams has been just about the number one point scorer in the last couple of years in KFC SuperCoach as well. How many of those guys, 180,000, 190,000 plus, are in your team at the moment? And how are you prioritising? You have to pick between sort of Maxwell, Khan, and Sams for round one.
Yeah, it's tough. I'd like to get as many of those guys in as I possibly could. I think actually some of the big guns are actually reasonably priced. Like in years gone by, they've been well over 200,000 to start the season. And Maxwell's just under 200,000, 195, but we know how dynamic he can be. And he's got the double round in round 3, a double game round. So he's pretty attractive. I think Stoinis is underpriced. He's only 163. Which again, last season he was up around or maybe even over 200,000. We know he's probably going to bat at the top of the order, and we know he can walk out with the ball as well. So he's pretty attractive, and he's in my team as well. Again, double round in round 3. I agree with the Phantom with Rashid Khan. I just think he's just got to be in your team. He's just so good. He's the best bowler in the world, and he just continually picks up wickets, keeps it tight. So many dot balls. He's just an absolute gun. Bonus that he's got the double round in round 2. I think Darcy Short's a little bit underpriced as well. He's only 179. So again, I think I paid it well over 200 for him last year. He might have been up around 250. So and we know he's going to bat at the top of the order. He can be dynamic. He's been a little bit underwhelming so far for Western Australia, but the bonus with him is he seems to be getting better and better with the ball and bowling more overs and picking up handy wickets. So he's someone that I'm looking at really closely as well. And I guess the other one is Dan Christian. He's one that I've always been a bit cold on and not really picked too often because he bats so low in the order and his bowling's okay, but he just keeps doing the job year in, year out. He's got so much experience, and with the double round in round 1, I think I'm going to start him in my team this year. So they're sort of the big guns that I'm looking at this stage. The big names that I would like to keep in my team for the majority of the season. But I also feel that some of the big guns are a little bit underpriced.
Yeah, no, I like that, Huss. I think that's a pretty good analysis. It's probably as cheap as we've been able to get some of these guys for at least a couple of seasons. Like certainly, as you say, like Marcus Stoinis, after he went on that runs rampage a couple of years ago, was close to 250,000 at one point in SuperCoach, and he's almost 100,000 less than that. But Cal, you've had first-hand insight and faced Daniel Sams in the nets the last couple of years as well. his rise to prominence probably hasn't surprised some of those in New South Wales cricket, where he's performed pretty well for a few years. But what have you seen from him in the last couple of years that's made him one of the most dominant bowlers in the BBL? And what was it that clicked for him last year as well to sort of take his batting to another level as well, sort of coming in at 5 or 6 and being able to finish off a few games for the Thunder as well?
Yeah, I've really seen him mature. He's got a really good handle on his strengths and weaknesses with the ball and the bat now. I think, with the bat, he probably would have expected from himself to have probably contributed a bit more the year before. But we were really keen to keep giving him opportunities to bat up where we could. We got him to 5 a few times and I think 4 once. We just tried to help him develop his game and get a feel for it. We know Big Bash cricket, it can all happen very quickly. And if you get under a bit of pressure with the bat and you haven't made runs for a while, it can be quite a dark place because you've got to walk out there and take the game on almost from ball one in most scenarios. So what we saw from him was just he really got a good handle on a method that was going to allow him to be successful, and he stuck to his strengths really well last year. And we tried to help him as much as we could develop a bit of a plan to get his innings started. And once he got his head around what sort of shots and what sort of options we're going to allow him to be a bit more consistent than he had been previously, he got some momentum, and then he just never looked back. He started clearing fences by a long, long way, but he also started to hit really powerfully along the ground. And when he hits the ball, you don't have a chance to move in the ring, so the gaps are a lot bigger for someone like him. So he actually became really consistent last year with the bat. But with the ball, I think working with Shane Bond was a really big, I suppose, eye-opener for him, because he was starting to look at different weaknesses and strengths of opposition batsmen and then work out, how he was able to stay away from their strengths and really bring the game back into his favour. And we saw him using his slower balls really effectively from different angles on the crease, using around the wicket and over the wicket. He really did take the world by storm last year, and it wasn't a huge surprise to us because we'd seen him so closely for a while. We probably actually expected him to come along a little bit quicker than he did with the bat, but with the ball, he was just so consistent across the last 2 seasons. I'm expecting him to go to another level again this year. I'm tossing up whether to pick him at the moment just because his price is so high, and I'm wondering what opportunities he'll get with the bat. I'm erring towards picking him mainly because of some of the inexperience that's gone out of that batting lineup at the Thunder. So I think he might get a few more opportunities in the middle to lower order, which really does bring him right into calculations for round 1 and throughout the season for mine.
Hey, Huss, we just had a question come in about a big WA quickie who's going to be playing down in Hobart this year, Joel Paris. I don't know how much of Joel you've seen. Those that follow the one-day cricket and will have seen him bob up for, I think he might have played 1 or 2 one-days, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, when it looked like he was going to be, one of those great sort of left-arm backup options alongside Michell Stark for the Aussie white ball team, but due to injury and a few other things, really hasn't gone his way. But he's quite cheap this year in SuperCoach, only 62K, and all reports are he's bowling really well in WA grade cricket at the moment as well. So with James Faulkner going out of the Hurricanes team, is he the type of guy that you think might be a decent bench pick in your bowlers?
Yeah, most definitely. I've actually got him in my team at the moment. I think with no James Faulkner there at the Hurricanes, I think he'll be a decent option. He is a quality bowler. He can swing that new ball, which is always handy. If you can get some wickets like Faulkner used to up the top of the innings, that'd be pretty handy. And he's actually not the worst batsman as well. He bats number 3 I think he bats 4 for his club team. And so, he scores plenty of runs as well. So he could help you with a couple of handy runs towards the end of the innings. I guess the only thing you've got to be careful of, he's had a lot of injuries over the course of his career. Now, I know T20, he only has to bowl 4 overs, so that's pretty handy, but he has had a lot of problems with his legs. So just be a little bit wary about that. But because he's so cheap, he's got a new chance at a new team at the Hurricanes. if he's picked in round 1, then it looks like hopefully they'll give him plenty of opportunity. Then I think he's a good option on your bench. Yeah. The other one I forgot to mention earlier was Mitch Marsh. I think he's underpriced as well. He's been in pretty good form for Australia, batting at number 3. From all reports over here in the West, he wants to bat high in the order for the Scorchers as well. So he's going to have every opportunity of hopefully getting some big runs. And he's bowling really well as well. He's in a good stage in his life. He's a bit older now. He's quite settled off the field, a bit more experienced. So at 132,000, I think Mitch Marsh could be a good buy as well.
Yeah, Phantom, I think you were going to jump in. But yeah, no, Huss, Finch and Marsh were the first 2 I picked, so couldn't agree with you more there.
Yeah, I agree. Mitch Marsh is one who can definitely ruin a weekend or ruin a KFC SuperCoach round if you don't have him, the way he can take the game away from the opposition and score in KFC SuperCoach BBL. But just on what Huss said about Joel Paris, 62K, I like him for the bench too. Took 3 for over here in the Shield opener against SA, and he's made some handy runs too, as Huss mentioned. Bats high for his grade club and lower order for WA, but 19 to 27, I think he faced 80 balls against Tassie last week. So can use a bat, and that could come in handy. If you can take a couple of wickets and then plunder a few balls late in the innings, could be a nice pick for 62K.
Yeah, no, I like it, Phantom. So we don't want to give away too many of our secrets, guys, but unfortunately, as part of the official KFC SuperCoach team now, we have to give out at least some advice and try and point the punters in the right direction. So, Cal, if there's a smoky or someone that you're considering for your team that might be a bit off Broadway, who's that person that you think might be your point of difference?
Yeah, look, I think I mentioned him a little bit earlier. I think Tim David's the one for me. I think he's just got that power to clear the pickets. Batting down at Bellerive and Launceston, they're quite short square, so you can really get a hold of them, particularly Blundstone. It's such a great place to bat. So I think they'll look to push him up the order when they push past the 10 over mark if they've got wickets in the shed. I think he'll be someone they'll look to push up the order and maximise a good start. And I think they'll get plenty of them if Wade and also Darcy get away like they have in previous years. I expect him to do some serious damage at Blundstone over the tournament. But most of the grounds aren't going to be big enough for this guy. Having watched him over the last sort of 6 months around the world, he's plundering the ball, and he's someone I think that will catch a lot of people off guard. He's someone that could do some serious damage, and with him working on his bowling, it would be an added bonus if he does start to bowl a few overs. But he's one for mine. One to keep an eye on with regards to makeup of the strikers' side was Matt Renshaw for mine, because I think if Travis Head's not playing, then he might get a few overs with the ball. He started to show that he's reliable with the balls in one-day cricket, and he's starting to bowl a lot more overs in different formats. If Head doesn't play, I'd like to suggest that he's a really important player to get into your team at the price he's at, because he'll have a prominent role, I think, batting potentially at 4, I think, for the way the strikers line up. And if he bowls as well, his price could soar. So they're 2 for mine.
Yeah, no, I really like that. What about you, Huss? Who have you been hiding in your back pocket, trying to keep quiet?
I've got 2 for you. The first one's Aaron Hardy. I found out recently that over the last year or so, he's been playing, but with a bit of an ankle injury. So he hasn't been quite at his best. So in the off-season, he's had that cleaned up. He's back to almost full fitness. He's actually been hammering runs in grade cricket, batting high in the order. So he could be a pretty handy all-rounder, and if he's given the right opportunities, could really take a huge step in his development. But the other one that I'm pretty excited about, and it'll be interesting to see where he bats, is Hilton Cartwright. He's someone that's got unbelievable power, one of the most powerful guys in the competition, can finish off an innings really well. But it'd be interesting to see where he bats. The Stars might push him up the order, and he might even open the batting. He can help out with a couple of handy overs. But the other thing about him is I've always noticed that they put him in the hot spots in the field. He seems to be taking a lot of catches. He's got a rocket arm. He can get a few run-outs for you. And I just think he could be a good all-round package, someone that's sort of not sort of spoken about, all that often.
Now, Phantom, you're the master of hidden identities and hiding just about everything about yourself. Who are you Who are you liking as a point of difference pick for round one?
Oh, there's a few. I guess it will depend on what Ashton Agar does with international duty at his price, a good price there, maybe even down the track if he does come back in. I've always liked Bo Webster's obviously moved to the Stars this year to the Renegades. It's interesting to see where he bats in that lineup. Might get a bit more time with the ball there as well, but I've always been impressed. Well, he is always well priced as well, but we don't want him to get stuck too far down the order. But another one who I can't claim this one, but we'll give a shout out to other members of our team, Azza and Damo from Jock Reynolds pointed out, Josh Kahn from a cheapie from Tassie, an all-rounder who's been doing some impressive things around the country. Obviously, still a long way to go whether he lines up in the BBL opener, but a very cheap player who could come in and could be a nice one for your bench. So Josh Kahn there, courtesy of other team members Azza and Damo.
Yeah, and the one I like, and I'm surprised he's not checking the ownership stats in the last couple of days. I think he's only in 3 or 4% of teams at the moment. Is George Garton from the Strikers, who's just been playing in the IPL as well. Bit of an unknown out here. He played for Northcote in Premier Cricket in Victoria probably a couple of summers ago now, and at that stage they were talking him up as sort of England's best chance of having a Michell Stark type bowler in their lineup. So bowls probably 140s around that mark and can hit a pretty decent ball too. Like you look at his strike rate, he only made 100 runs or so from limited opportunities in the Vitality Blast, but did it with a strike rate of about 150 or 160 when he batted 3 or 4 times in that tournament. So I think at 125k, he's got DPP as a bat bowler as well, and he's got that all-important double in round 2. So I'd definitely be YouTubing or Googling George Garton, check out some of his highlights because I think he could be a guy that comes out and has a pretty big impact. But while we're talking internationals, Cal, like I'm keen to get your thoughts on how we go about approaching picking the internationals, because some of the guys, like this time last preseason, heading into BBL 10, we were red hot on Will Jacks from the Hurricanes. Like he was coming out here as one of the best English batting prospects we've seen for a long time, and just unfortunately didn't go to plan for him down at Hobart. But a lot of people picked him at the start of the season, thinking he'd probably bowl a bit as well, which didn't really eventuate. But as someone that's been involved in a BBL franchise for a long time, do they generally give these international guys a bit of time to assimilate, to get used to the conditions? And is that something we should be mindful of as super coaches?
Yeah, I'd be keeping an eye on articles written about arrival dates and how long they'll have from the time they land to first game that they play. Look, from my experience, the Vitality Blast and the Big Bash are 2 very different styles of cricket. It's the same format, but it's a very different style, and the pitches are quite different. The grounds are different size. So, I feel like I'd be leaning towards overseas players that have had experience at domestic T20 level or international level prior to this season. That's the way I'd be leaning, just because it is such a different tournament. And what we have seen is that sometimes it takes some of these players a bit of time to get used to it and find their way. Alex Hales is someone who didn't necessarily nail it the first time he came or the second time he came, but from there on in, he's just been absolutely blistering for the Thunder. That's just one example. Sam Billings started to find his feet with the bat as we pushed deeper into the tournament. So, look, you do get the odd example where Joss Butler just hit the ground running from ball 1 and was smacking them everywhere, but it's not as simple as that. I think I'd be leaning towards players with a little bit more experience in Australian conditions if you're going down the route of having a number of these overseas players.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think Alex Hales is the perfect example there, Cal. Like what he had a bit of a cameo at the Renegades, played a bit for Hobart, played for the Strikers, I think, as well, and never really got going for any of those franchises. Put him up at the Thunder, comes back for a full season, and look at what he did. I think he was second for runs overall in the BBL last year. But Hustler, Cal's comparing the English T20 competition and the Big Bash there. You've had a fair bit of experience over in the IPL. How does the IPL compare? Like if we're looking for a form line, how does that compare to the Big Bash as well, or because they're such different conditions, do you just have to, I don't know, write off a bit what might have happened in the IPL if you're looking for a batsman or a bowler in form?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to compare, I think, because the conditions are so different. I think Fergie's nailed it there. I think you go for your bankers that have been in Australian conditions before. They understand how the Big Bash works. They know the conditions really well. You know, guys like your Rashid Khan, Curran, Alex Hales now that's got some experience. You know what you're generally going to get from these guys. The unknowns, you're taking a big gamble, I think. And with your overseas players, you want to make sure you really nail them. So I think Ferg's absolutely nailed it. I 100% back up what he's saying.
Yeah, I really like Tom Abel. I don't know why. I saw some YouTube highlights of him maybe a few months back, and I think he's the type of player that potentially with his freakish talent could come out here and do quite well. But I thought that about Joe Denley a couple of seasons ago as well, when sort of he came out and didn't really fire on all cylinders for the Sixers. So going to be interesting to see. Guys, we'll get, because I don't know if we'll catch you again in pre-season. You're obviously both fairly busy with all your commitments in cricket, but we'll get a quick Ashes preview and prediction from you out of the way as well. Ben Stokes is coming out, we know that, which has been the big talking point of the last couple of weeks. Great to see him in a good place and able to come out here and tour. And it was only, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we didn't even know if the Ashes were going ahead, but thankfully it looks like, well, I don't know if there's going to be a test in Perth, but aside from that, it looks like the Ashes are going ahead. What do you think is going to happen? Are we going to get this Aussie domination that's been tipped, or with a full-strength English team, is it going to be a great series?
I hope it's going to be a great series, and it is great to see Ben Stokes going to make the trip. I think that's huge for England. I just think England should be careful. Like, it's not going to be easy for Ben Stokes. He hasn't played cricket for a long time. He's had a bad injury. He's had some mental health issues. For him just to step back into an Ashes cauldron and think he's just going to start blazing him it's not going to happen just quite that easily. So I wouldn't be expecting the world from Ben Stokes, but he's one of those spirit sort of players. So when he's around the group, he seems to lift everyone around him. So he's still a big in. I'm a little bit concerned about the English top order, that they've got some inexperience in Australian conditions. And so it'll be interesting to see how they go, especially against a top quality Australian attack. I think Joe Root's he's the linchpin there, and he's had an unbelievable year. But I've still got question marks, in Australian conditions. He's a great player of spin, and he's a great player on those slower wickets where he can wait for the ball and play it late and manipulate the field. But he hasn't quite nailed it in Australia before, where there's the extra pace and bounce, and he hasn't got that extra time to sort of use his hands to work the ball. So I really love him to have a great series, and really make Australia sort of toil a little bit and continue on his good form. Their bowling attack looks honest. To be honest, there's no sort of real standouts there. I'm so disappointed Jofra Archer hasn't made the trip. I would have loved to have seen him, in Australia, roughing up a few of our batsmen. But I just think it's dangerous though to underestimate this English team. Everyone's been saying Australia 5-0, 4-0, and to be honest, Australia should win. Looking at the two teams on paper, but we've had this situation where we've gone to England and they've sort of they've been spruiking that this is the worst Australian team ever to land on our shores, and we've ended up winning. So I just think it's dangerous to write this English team off. I think they can come here with less pressure, less expectation, and just get out there and have a good crack at it. There's a lot of guys in that squad that haven't had scars of the past. So if they can get some momentum going, then, you never know. But I'm still tipping Australia and hoping Australia can win well.
Yeah. All right, Cal, put your selector's cap on. Who's gonna open with David Warner in the first test, and who's going to be batting at number 5?
Usman Khawaja is in, and Travis Head at 5 for me. And I'm a bit like Huss. I'm a bit worried about the top order from England. I think that certainly the inexperience in these conditions with the Australian attack, the way they bowl and the bounce, the consistency of Hazelwood and Cummins is just going to put them under all sorts of pressure. And then the threat that Michell Stark has with that explosive ability to take wickets with the new ball and blast new batters out when they first walk to the wicket. I just feel like there's going to be no respite for that top order, and then they've got to deal with Nathan Lyon as well. So, look, I feel like Stokes will have an impact. It might take him a bit, though, to get back into it. Like Huss mentioned, you don't just walk back into international cricket and just start dominating from ball one. He certainly gives them balance, but it's not going to be enough to get them anywhere near a series win. I think it'll be 3-1. Inevitably, Sydney's ordinary weather will see a draw or the chance for England to draw one on a flat one there. But I can't see them getting anywhere near Australia in this series. I'm looking forward to a thumping.
Yeah, the way Josh Hazelwood's bowling at the moment too, pretty ominous for England's top order. Phantom, great to have you on. Look forward to. I think your team reveal is one of the first up from our official team next week as well. So I don't think we've got a sight just yet on where your team is at, but hopefully you're close to finalising how you'd like to look at this stage.
Getting there, might have to put Tim David in after this, I reckon. Still one.
Yeah, SAR.
But we're teammates over here, so he'll be happy to share. No, as I mentioned, just picking the guns at the moment, just going to build it around it. I'm going to go back over the numbers from the grade cricket, from the other T20 tournaments, and watch a bit of Shield just to see what sort of value we can find there, and keep a close eye on the makeup of the different sides around the country, because plenty of bargains, I think, still to find. So looking forward to a big sum. It all ramps up from now.
Yeah, well, Huss, Ferg and Phantom, thanks heaps for jumping on for a chat today. As you said, it's our official KFC SuperCoach launch today, which is why we're all here. You can head to supercoach.com.au and pick your team today, and you'll have the chance to take on my team, Phantom's team, but more importantly, Huss, Ferg, Shane Warren's team, who's on board as our ambassador again, and Ishigua's team as well, and all our other official KFC SuperCoach experts for the summer too. So, Huss, great to have you on. Thanks for jumping on, and Ferg, awesome to have you as part of the team as well for the summer. So, thanks to everyone for tuning in, and you'll hear from us again soon.